The hospital corridor reeked of antiseptic and fear. Nurses scattered like sparrows as Vance, Viper, King stormed through the automatic doors, his boots thundering against linoleum. Behind him, 5 Hells Angels in full patch marched in formation, their leather cuts adorned with the infamous death head insignia. The security guard reached for his radio, then thought better of it when he saw the murder in Vance's eyes. "Where's my daughter?" The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. A trembling intern pointed toward room 247. Vance kicked the door open, not violently, but with the absolute authority of a man who never asked permission for anything in his life. The room was warm, almost stifling, but Maya King sat upright in the hospital bed, wrapped in heated blankets, her lips still faintly blue. "Dad," she started, but Vance was already at her side, his calloused hands that had broken bones and built engines, cradling her face with surprising gentleness. "You're okay. You're safe now." His voice cracked on the last word. Maya nodded, then her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, there was a boy. He saved me." Vance stepped back, his jaw tightening. "What boy?" She gestured to the chair beside her bed. Draped across it was an oversized denim jacket, stained with grease and motor oil, the fleece lining matted and worn. The fabric was still damp from melted snow. "He gave me his coat. Those bastards, Hunter and his friends, they kicked me out of the car in the middle of the blizzard as a joke. They drove off with my jacket still inside. I was freezing, Dad. I couldn't feel my hands. I thought I was going to die." Her voice broke. "Then this kid found me. He didn't know who I was. He didn't ask questions. He just took off his coat, put it on me, and flagged down a salt truck. There was only room for 1 passenger." Vance's expression darkened. "Where is he now?" Maya's tears spilled over. "He walked away in a t-shirt, Dad. In a t-shirt. The wind chill was -20. He's going to die if someone doesn't find him." Vance picked up the jacket with both hands, examining it like a sacred relic. Inside the collar, written in faded sharpet, C. Miller. In the breast pocket, a crumpled receipt from Morrison's scrapyard, dated 3 days ago. 14 hours of labor. $80 cash. The president of the Hells Angels turned to his sergeant-at-arms, a mountain of scarred muscle named Brick. "Call the charter. Every member. Every hang-around. I don't care if they're sleeping, eating, or screwing. The boy is out there freezing to death. No one rests until he's found." Brick pulled out his phone. "What's the name?" Vance stared at the jacket, his jaw working. "C. Miller. Start with the scrapyard. 12 hours earlier." Caleb Miller's hands were raw. The December wind cut through the scrapyard like razors, turning every piece of metal into a frozen trap. He'd been sorting aluminum from steel for the past 12 hours, his fingers so numb he could barely feel the cuts anymore. The foreman, a pot-bellied man named Eddie who smelled like cheap whiskey, approached with Caleb's pay envelope. "Good work today, kid." Eddie's smile didn't reach his eyes. Caleb took the envelope without opening it. He'd learned not to count his money in front of Eddie. It made the man uncomfortable, which meant fewer shifts. He stuffed it into the pocket of his denim jacket and started the long walk home. The jacket was his most valuable possession. Vintage, probably from the 70s, with a fleece lining that had been patched so many times it looked like a quilt. He'd found it in the scrapyard 3 years ago, wedged between a crushed refrigerator and a rusted motorcycle frame. It had probably belonged to a mechanic once. The name tag was long gone, but the pocket still smelled faintly of motor oil and cigarettes. It was the only thing standing between Caleb and the polar vortex that was supposed to hit tonight. The walk to his home was 5 miles. Home was generous. It was a condemned shed behind the scrapyard, barely weatherproof, with a wood-burning stove he'd salvaged from a demolition site. No electricity. No running water. But it was his. The sky had turned the color of old bruises by the time he reached the industrial district. The first snowflakes began to fall, fat and lazy, then smaller and faster. Within minutes, the world disappeared into a white void. Caleb pulled his collar up and kept walking. His breath crystallized in front of his face. His boots, held together with duct tape, crunched through snow that was already ankle-deep. The wind picked up, howling between abandoned warehouses, turning the falling snow into horizontal knives. Then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Sobbing. Caleb stopped, squinting through the whiteout. There, a dark shape huddled against the chain-link fence. As he got closer, the shape resolved into a girl, maybe 17 or 18, wearing nothing but a thin sweater and jeans. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, her entire body shaking violently. "Hey!" Caleb knelt beside her. Her lips were blue. Her skin had taken on a marble-white quality that made his stomach drop. He'd seen hypothermia before, back when his mom was still alive and they volunteered at shelters. This girl was in the danger zone. "My friends," she gasped through chattering teeth. "They left me. It was supposed to be a joke. They locked the doors and drove off. My jacket's still in the car." Caleb looked around. The street was deserted. The buses had stopped running an hour ago. No driver was stupid enough to navigate this storm. The visibility was maybe 10 feet. The wind chill had to be pushing -25. The girl's shaking was slowing down. That was bad. That meant her body was giving up. "What's your name?" Caleb asked, already shrugging off his jacket. "Maya," she whispered. "Okay, Maya. Listen to me. I'm going to get you help." He draped the heavy denim over her shoulders, pulling the collar up around her neck. The jacket swallowed her small frame. "Keep this on. Don't take it off." Maya's eyes widened. "But I'll be fine." The lie came easily. Caleb was already in a thin t-shirt, and the cold hit him like a physical blow. His skin erupted in goosebumps. His teeth began to chatter. "Stay here." He stumbled into the street, waving his arms. The storm swallowed his shouts. Then headlights. A massive city salt truck rumbled toward him, its plow scraping the asphalt. Caleb threw himself in front of it, forcing the driver to stop. The window rolled down. An older man with a gray beard glared out. "You got a death wish, kid? There's a girl." Caleb pointed toward Maya. "She's hypothermic. You need to take her to the hospital. Now." The driver looked past him, saw Maya's huddled form, and cursed. "All right, get her in." "There's only one seat," Caleb interrupted. He was already pulling Maya to her feet, half carrying her toward the truck. She was barely conscious now, her head lolling against his shoulder. "Kid, you can't. Take her to County General. Tell them it's hypothermia. Go!" Caleb shoved Maya into the truck's cab, slammed the door, and pounded on the side. "Go!" The driver hesitated for one more second, then the truck lurched forward, its taillights disappearing into the storm. Caleb stood alone in the empty street. The wind hit him full force now, biting through the thin cotton of his t-shirt. His arms were already numb. His chest felt like it was wrapped in ice. 5 miles. He could make 5 miles. He started walking. By mile 2, Caleb couldn't feel his hands. By mile 3, he couldn't feel his face. His thoughts were getting foggy, sluggish, like his brain was freezing from the inside out. He kept seeing his mother, not as she'd been at the end, wasted away by cancer, but young and healthy, smiling at him from their old kitchen. "Keep walking, baby. You're almost home." But he wasn't almost home. He was barely past the warehouse district. His legs felt like lead. Each step required a conscious decision, a battle against his body's screaming demand to stop, to lie down, to rest. The shed appeared like a mirage. Caleb fell against the door, his hands too numb to work the latch. He shoulder-checked it open and stumbled inside. The wood stove sat cold and dark in the corner. He needed to start a fire. He needed warmth. His hands wouldn't cooperate. They were blocks of ice, useless and clumsy. The matches scattered across the floor. Caleb stared at them, then at his blue-white fingers, and understood with perfect clarity that he was going to die. He pulled a pile of dirty tarps over himself and curled into a ball. The shaking had stopped. That was good, right? He was so tired. His mother was calling him. She wanted him to sleep. It's okay, baby. You can rest now. You did good. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the dying whisper of the wind. A deep, rumbling thunder that shook the shed's walls. Not thunder. Engines. V-twin engines. Bright lights cut through the cracks in the shed's walls, turning the darkness into a lattice of golden beams. Caleb tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. The door exploded inward, kicked off its hinges. A massive silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by headlights. The figure stepped inside, and Caleb saw him clearly, a mountain of a man with a gray beard, face tattoos, and eyes that could melt steel. He wore a leather cut with a death head patch over his heart. "Gotcha, kid," Vance King said. His voice was surprisingly gentle. He knelt beside Caleb, pressing 2 fingers against his neck. "He's got a pulse." "Barely. Get the blankets." "Now!" Hands lifted Caleb, wrapping him in what felt like a dozen heated blankets. Someone stripped off his frozen t-shirt and replaced it with a warm fleece. A helmet was placed on his head. Then he was on a motorcycle, wedged between 2 riders, their body heat seeping into him like a slow thaw. The last thing Caleb heard before unconsciousness took him was Vance's voice, hard and cold. "Find out who abandoned the girl. I want names. I want addresses. And I want them before sunrise." Caleb woke to beeping machines and the smell of clean sheets. For a moment, panic seized him. Hospitals cost money he didn't have. Then the memories flooded back, the storm, the girl, the bikers. He tried to sit up, but his body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. Every muscle ached. His fingers were bandaged. And 4 lines snaked into his arm. "Easy." The voice came from the corner of the room. Vance King sat in a chair that looked comically small beneath his bulk, his arms crossed over his death head patch. "You've been out for 2 days. Doctor said you were 15 minutes from dying when we found you." Caleb's throat was dry. "Maya?" Vance's expression softened fractionally. "My daughter is fine. Thanks to you." The words didn't process immediately. Then, "Your daughter?" "Maya King. 17 years old. Apple of my eye. The girl you saved." Vance leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You gave her your coat. Walked 5 miles in a t-shirt in the worst blizzard this city's seen in 50 years. Why?" Caleb stared at his bandaged hands. "She was freezing. So were you." "She was freezing worse." Vance studied him for a long moment. "The doctor said you've got frostbite on 8 fingers, both ears, and your nose. You'll probably lose a toenail. But you'll live." He paused. "Why do you live in a shed behind a scrapyard, Caleb Miller?" The use of his full name made Caleb flinch. "How did you?" "I know everything about you now. I know your mother died 3 years ago. I know your stepfather, Frank Miller, stole your inheritance, the house your mom left you, the life insurance money. I know he kicked you out when you turned 18 and you've been living off cash jobs ever since." Vance's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "I know you're invisible to this city. But you're not invisible to me. Not anymore." Caleb wanted to argue, to tell this terrifying stranger to mind his own business, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. "I don't want your pity." "Good. Because I'm not offering pity." Vance stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the bed. "I'm offering a debt. You saved my blood. That means my blood bleeds for you now. Rest up, kid. We've got work to do." 3 days later, Caleb was discharged. He expected to find the Hells Angels gone, a fever dream brought on by hypothermia. Instead, Brick was waiting in the lobby with a clean set of clothes and a leather jacket. "Boss wants to see you," Brick said. It wasn't a request. They rode through the city on Brick's Harley, the engines roared drowning out Caleb's questions. The first stop was a fraternity house on the university's north campus. 50 motorcycles were parked in neat rows on the lawn, their riders standing silent and still as statues. Vance stood at the center of the formation, his arms crossed. In front of him, a young man in expensive designer clothes was on his knees in the snow, sobbing. "This is Hunter Bradley," Vance announced as Caleb approached. "He's the piece of trash who left my daughter to freeze. His daddy's a lawyer. His trust fund could buy this whole block." Vance's smile was colder than the blizzard had been. "But money can't buy your way out of this." Hunter looked up at Caleb, his face streaked with tears. "I didn't know who she was. We were just messing around. It was supposed to be a joke." "A joke?" Vance repeated the word like it was poison. He turned to Caleb. "What do you think we should do with jokers, kid?" Caleb stared at Hunter, remembering Maya's blue lips, her marble white skin. "He left her to die." "He did." Vance gestured to Hunter's brand new Range Rover, parked in the driveway. "That the car you used?" Hunter nodded miserably. "Brick. Sledgehammer." What followed was methodical destruction. The bikers took turns smashing the Range Rover into scrap metal while Hunter watched, his expensive car reduced to twisted wreckage in 15 minutes. When they were done, Vance walked over to Hunter and stripped off his North Face jacket and his Jordan sneakers. "You left a girl to freeze in the snow," Vance said quietly. "Now you walk home. 3 miles. Same distance she would have had to walk if this young man hadn't saved her." He leaned close. "We'll be watching. You run, you call someone, you try to cheat, and we come back for your daddy's Porsche? Understand?" Hunter nodded, shaking. "Good. Start walking." They watched Hunter stumble away in his socks, then the motorcycles roared to life, following at a distance, not to help, but to ensure he suffered every step. The second stop was Caleb's childhood home. The house looked exactly as he remembered it, small, worn, but sturdy. Frank Miller answered the door with a beer in hand, ready to yell at whoever was bothering him on a Saturday afternoon. Then he saw the wall of leather and denim. The color drained from his face. "Frank Miller?" Vance didn't wait for confirmation. "You stole this house from your stepson. You forged documents, emptied his mother's life insurance, and threw him out to die in the cold. That about right?" Frank tried to slam the door. Brick's boot stopped it cold. "I have a lawyer here," Vance continued, gesturing to a thin man in a suit who'd been standing behind the formation. "He's got evidence of fraud, forgery, and theft. We can call the cops right now, and you spend the next decade in prison. Or," Vance pulled out a sheaf of papers, "you sign the deed back to Caleb, pack a bag, and leave this city in the next 10 minutes. Your choice." Frank's eyes darted between Vance and Caleb. "You can't just..." The sergeant-at-arms cracked his knuckles. The sound was like gunshots. Frank grabbed a pen. 5 minutes later, Frank Miller was speeding away in his rusted pickup, everything he owned crammed in the bed. Vance handed Caleb the deed to the house, freshly notarized. "It's yours," Vance said. "Like it should have been 3 years ago." Caleb stared at the paper, unable to speak. "Come on," Vance said, clapping him on the shoulder. "One more stop." The Hells Angels clubhouse was exactly what Caleb expected. Dim lighting, the smell of motor oil and whiskey, walls covered in patches and photographs. But what he didn't expect was the frame hanging above the bar. His old denim jacket. Cleaned, patched, and displayed like a museum piece. "That jacket saved my daughter's life," Vance explained. "It deserves to be honored." The entire charter was assembled, men and women in full patch, prospects in their plain leather, even the hangarounds who'd helped with the search. They parted as Vance led Caleb to the front of the room. "Caleb Miller walked into a blizzard with nothing but kindness and a warm coat," Vance announced. "He asked for nothing, expected nothing. He was ready to die so a stranger could live. That's the kind of man we want in this family." He handed Caleb a leather vest, a cut, but without patches. Just 2 words embroidered on the back: Prospect. "You're not required to accept," Vance said quietly. But if you do, you'll never be invisible again. You'll never be cold again. You'll have brothers and sisters who'll ride into hell for you, same as you walked into that storm for Maya. Caleb looked around the room. At the faces watching him, scarred, tattooed, dangerous faces that somehow looked warm. For the first time since his mother died, he felt something other than cold emptiness. I didn't do it for this, Caleb said softly. Vance smiled, a real smile this time. I know. That's exactly why you're here. Outside, the snow had started falling again, but this time Caleb barely noticed the cold. He stood in the clubhouse parking lot, wearing his prospect cut, the keys to a modest Harley-Davidson in his hand. The jacket hung inside, next to photographs of members who'd passed, brothers and sisters who'd earned their place in club history. Maya appeared beside him, wrapped in a heavy winter coat, her color fully returned. Thank you, she said simply. Caleb shrugged, embarrassed. Anyone would have. No, she interrupted. They wouldn't. I know exactly who would and wouldn't. That's why you're family now. Through the clubhouse windows, Caleb could see the Hells Angels laughing, drinking, planning their next ride. A prospect was waving him back inside. Brick was challenging someone to arm wrestling. Vance was watching it all with the satisfied expression of a king surveying his kingdom. Caleb took one last look at the falling snow, then walked back inside. Into the warmth.